Hello again, Professor Williams. My name is Jackson Wheathorn, and this is my submission for the History of Your Future Career assignment. I actually wanted to do this project over a career that I don't plan on going into, but it's something that I've always wanted to do, something that I'm actually planning on doing this fall, and that's coaching a basketball team. I put an application to coach at Texas Wind, the homeschool athletic program that I was talking about last week, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. I'm looking forward to that potentially being an opportunity. I'm a business major, so it felt it just didn't really feel that applicable to talk about business careers with this being a kinesiology class. So I hope that's okay. But anyway, to get into the beginning stages of coaching, I got to go all the way back to the founding of basketball in 1891. The sport was founded and created by Dr. James Naismith, who was a Canadian physical ed teacher, and subsequently was the first coach of the sport. Now, when I looked into who everyone else sees as kind of the first coach, obviously not including Dr. Naismith, the guy that I kept seeing was Forrest Allen. Forrest Allen actually was given the nickname of the father of basketball coaching. And this is a guy who worked under Dr. Naismith, coached with Dr. Naismith, up until he went out on his own to coach at Kansas University. Now this was like late 1800s, early 1900s, even up until probably around the 20s. Once we got to around the 20s, 30s, 40s, early 50s, we kind of get to see the beginning stages of really game planning, really scheming as a coach, really getting into the X's and O's. To mention a couple names, Adolph Rupp, coach at Kentucky, Henry Eba, coach at Oklahoma State. These are guys who focused on defensive schemes and getting easy, fast break points. Eba really focused on player development, fundamentals, discipline, just things like this, kind of the basics of coaching. If we fast forward a little bit further into the 60s, early 60s, and into the 70s as well, we see legends like John Wooden, who won 10 NCAA titles in 12 years, actually is the most winningest men's college basketball coach as far as titles. And then, just as a side note, technically, he's not the most winningest coach as far as titles. That's actually Gino Arima. Gino Arima. Sorry, I'm probably butchering his name. That is the UConn women's head coach who actually won his 12th title in 2024. So John Wooden is not technically the most winningest coach in basketball and college basketball, but he is on the men's side. Absolute legend. I think he won his last title in 1975 and ended up winning 7 in a row, which is pretty awesome. But fast forwarding a little bit further, once we get into the 80s, once we get into the 90s, even into the early 2000s, we get to see kind of a little bit more of the modern day basketball, what we know today as being basketball. We get to see guys like Bob Knight, like Coach K, like Dean Smith, some of these college legends. And then we also get to see NBA legends like Phil Jackson, like Pat Riley, like Greg Popovich. These are guys that I have looked to a lot. I'm not as big on college basketball. I've been learning. I've been watching a lot more recently. But I know a lot more about the history of the NBA, and these are NBA legends. These are coaches that have been so influential in the sport. I know Phil Jackson obviously is super known for his triangle offense, kind of changed the game in that way a little bit. And then a coach like Greg Popovich, who really just focused on the fundamentals, on player development, on making the extra pass, constantly making the right reads and making the right decisions. This is a guy who I really noticed for the first time watching Coach Pop that he elevated a team and elevated them in a very, very different way than some other teams and some other coaches. I noticed a lot of times teams are very good, a lot of times because they have great players. And a lot of times the coaches are discounted a little bit, but Coach Pop is really a guy that stands out as an elevator as a coach. Now, as we fast forward a little bit further again into kind of modern day basketball, what modern day basketball looks like today, what the coaching profession looks like today, it's become very analytical. It's become very reliant on statistics. There's NBA teams now hiring entire teams of statisticians to come in and run the numbers and find the most efficient way to play basketball. One of the names that comes to mind is Coach Joe Mazzulla for the Boston Celtics. This is a guy who every game, he game plans for every game and says, we need to take X amount of 2-pointers. We need to take X amount of 3-pointers. We need to make X amount of passes. And this is a guy that really focuses on the numbers. And there's a lot of complaints today about it becoming kind of a boring way to play basketball. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous, but it has become a little bit boring sometimes when you turn on the game and you get to see teams just chucking up a bunch of 3-pointers. There's teams that are very focused on the statistics, and it's worked. The Celtics won last year. They were in the finals a couple of years and lost to the Warriors. Fantastic strategy. But it's also really interesting to see coaches like Mark Dagnall this year, like Rick Carlisle this year in the finals, that have really focused on the defensive end of the basketball, moving fast, getting fast break points, really trying to score in 7 seconds on offense or less, and then focusing on that defensive end, being hard-nosed, being great defensive programs. And that's really become kind of the way to go is getting a team with depth and instilling those core values as a coach of the fundamentals of defense, of hard-nosed, disciplined basketball. And so anyway, with that being said, that's kind of the short history of coaching. I went a little bit fast. I'm sorry if I missed out on anything. If you need anything else, please let me know. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Have a good rest of your night. Thank you so much. Hey again, Professor. Sorry, just really quick. I realized watching my video back and even editing it a little bit that I didn't talk about anything to do with kind of the racial issues that happened throughout basketball and throughout coaching. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that really quick. I'm sorry if the video goes a little bit long. But I did want to mention John McClendon being the first African-American coach at the collegiate level in 1966, and then Bill Russell being the first African-American coach in the NBA in also 1966. This was actually a really big deal. For a while, there was a lot of segregation in basketball, that there was white leagues and then African-American leagues. And then eventually after segregation and after the civil rights movement, we got to see a little bit more of that integration, which is a fantastic thing. And I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned John McClendon and Bill Russell being really kind of the coaches that the first African-American coaches in the league and in the sport. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that I threw that in too. That has been an issue that basketball faced, especially early days, was an issue of race. So anyway, have a good rest of your night. Thank you so much.